Hello, welcome back to Guitar Better. Or whatever is. Hey guys. Hello, welcome back. If you have watched my previous videos or whatever, thank you so much for your support. I hope you are enjoying learning how to play the guitar. I know that I love playing the guitar. That's why I'm making these videos. So anyway, thank you so much. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. And as you can see, we're getting close to Christmas. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to make this video to give you guys sort of an idea on what to look for when purchasing a guitar. There's a few things I want to talk about and I want to cover, and I wrote them down just to make sure that I actually got them, because I would totally forget if I didn't. First thing to look for. That is not the first thing that we're going to look for. Okay, so there's a few differences. Number one, we got size. First thing we're going to talk about is the types of guitars. There are three main types of guitars that we're going to be looking at. The first one is an acoustic guitar. The second one is a classical guitar. And the third one is an electric guitar. Now, the difference between an acoustic and a classical guitar can be many, but for looks-wise, it's really not that different. The main thing you're going to notice is that instead of steel strings on the bottom three strings of the guitar, the first three, I mean, they're going to be nylon instead of metal. So they're going to look kind of clear, probably. Anyway, nylon strings, if you were to try to strum the guitar, you would notice as your hand reached around it, it's actually going to be a thicker neck. Sometimes they won't actually have dots on the fretboard or anything. That just comes from a more classical tradition and style of making a guitar. Now, with a classical guitar as well, usually the headstock is going to look like a regular guitar headstock, but it'll have holes where the strings will wrap around and wrap through. It'll look a lot more like a violin. Okay, so a classical guitar, great way to start off with if you're a beginner or wanting to learn the classical guitar. I hope to try to make a few of those videos in the future. But the biggest thing we're looking for in a classical guitar, it's got a wider neck, right? And nylon strings are the biggest thing. The nylon strings are going to give you a lot warmer sound, and by warmer I mean, let's see, how do you describe it? Darker is a word, more mellow, actually, that's probably the best way to describe it. So when I refer to like a darker, warmer tone, it's really more mellow, more rich almost. That's not really a good description, but with a classical guitar, you're looking at that. So your tone's going to be different. Usually the guitar is going to be a little bit smaller than maybe the standard acoustic guitars that you see, and it's going to be more circular, not usually have any cutaways. They're great guitars for beginners. Usually the strings have less tension in them, so it's actually a lot easier to depress the string and play notes. However, it might not be the style of guitar that you're looking for, which moves us on to the second style, which is just the acoustic guitar, which is going to be here. What you'll notice is it's first off got steel strings. Can be a little bit harder to depress, but it'll have a more a tone that you will probably recognize a lot faster, right? This is going to be the main guitar that we see people use a lot. Some things to keep in mind with an acoustic guitar: you're going to have different body shapes and styles and sizes. So the first guitar that you might see is called a dreadnought, and it's going to be a lot bigger. I'll post another picture here. And with a dreadnought, usually has a cutaway. The body is going to be a lot bigger, a little bit thicker, and it is they made them to have a lot louder frequency when you're playing the guitar. So they will sound a lot louder, and they're great for strumming. So it's really what they're made for. A lot of guys you see, they just strum, flat pick, whatever. They're great guitars in general. Usually the style that you'll see too is a dreadnought. Not necessarily the best guitar if you're looking for a smaller size, a smaller feel, but that's what they're called. If you guys walk into a guitar shop or whatever and ask for an acoustic guitar, you'll be able to tell them you want a dreadnought or you won't want a dreadnought. Another thing you can look for with an acoustic guitar is a lot of times we'll have a cutaway. So if you guys remember my guitar, it's just rounded when it meets the neck of the guitar. The cutaway is when it actually, the guitar, the bottom half of the guitar is cut away, which allows your hand to travel further up the fretboard, allowing you to reach a lot higher on the fretboard a lot easier. So you might want that, you might not. It's kind of a looks and playing thing. When you're starting off as a beginner, it's not necessarily going to matter as much because your hand is not going to travel much past the 5th fret anyway. Alright, another thing that we can look at is the size. So we've already said a dreadnought. Well, then you have the regular size, the full size. There's also something called a 3/4 size guitar, and what that is, they've just taken the guitar and shrunk it down a quarter. This is really popular with something called the GS Mini, or like the Taylor Big Baby. Ed Sheeran uses a 3/4 size guitar. It has a lot of the similarities and qualities to a regular guitar, but it's just smaller. It might feel better in your hands. Usually they sound pretty good. It's just minor tonal differences. So I would recommend looking at one of those. So if you go into a shop and you want an acoustic guitar, I would recommend asking for a dreadnought. I would recommend asking for a 3/4 size guitar. And then from there you can see if you like the looks and preferences of the cutaway or not. I actually really like the cutaway. My guitar, the Larrivee that I have, does not have a cutaway, which is fine. And it works well for me. Sometimes it gets me caught up and I just like, oh, but anyway, it works, and I like the look of it too. So now, moving on to the next type of guitar, we have an electric guitar. And this one is most iconic. I'll put it here, right? I'll probably show a Fender Strat because that's what I have. I love the Strat. I just grew up with one, so that's my preference over something like a Les Paul or a Tele or whatever. But an electric guitar usually has a solid wood body, and they have pickups so that when you play them, it's electronically amplified. Yeah, rock, a lot of rock guys usually use them. You guys hopefully will know the difference between an acoustic and an electric. A big thing to note, if you have no idea whatsoever on the difference between these, an electric guitar will not sound out. The sound won't really be projected when you play it. So if you go into a shop and try to play an electric guitar and you're like, why doesn't this sound right? It's because you need to plug it into an amp, which they can help you out there at your local guitar shop or whatever. It might feel a bit easier to play than, say, an acoustic guitar because unlike a classical guitar, you'll still have electrics, or I'm so sorry. You will still have steel strings, but usually your action is a lot lower. Action referring to the space between the string and the neck, the frets of the guitar. So a lower action constitutes an easier time pressing the strings down and getting each string to sound. Now, this all being said, that's the three main styles. to recap, we have a classical guitar, we have an acoustic guitar, and we have an electric guitar. Now, depending on your style, whatever you want to play, or just your preference, those are the main three, with little variances in between those and whatnot. We won't go into that now. Okay, so I'm going to check what's next on the list. Do you want to buy used or buy new? This is totally a preferential thing. I would suggest, though, staying away from maybe... If you are going to buy used, I would suggest still buying it from a guitar or a music store, as they will be able to help you adjust the guitar, and they'll be able to properly check it to make sure that they're not selling you a piece of junk. If you are just going to buy it from like Craigslist or eBay, or Craigslist, eBay, let's see what else. Yeah, I can't think of anything else right now. But anyway, Craigslist, eBay, you might not know, or even just going into like a pawn shop or whatever, you might have no idea on what to look for when purchasing a guitar. That's not a bad thing. It just means you're unexperienced. So if you do that, and you can do that, find great deals, I would suggest taking someone with you or asking someone who knows a lot about guitars so that they can look and tell you what to look for. A few things that you want to look for just in case you do want to buy used. You want to check the action. You don't want the action to be too high. And that can be too high, it's pretty relative. Look it up on Google. It'll tell you what too high is. My suggestion, though, when looking, is that the action needs to be pretty even. So the distance from the string and the neck should be pretty even all the way down the guitar, except for at the 12th fret, it should be slightly higher than at like the 1st or 3rd or 5th fret. So the action should be even, and if it's not, that can indicate a couple different things with your neck. Something else that you want to look for, I usually take and turn my guitar up and then look down the neck to try to see if the neck is bowed or warped, twisted. There's a lot of different things for when looking at that. You want to check the tuners, make sure that they don't just fall off or whatever. And let's see, cracking in the guitar is something that you want to look for. Sometimes the finish on an old guitar is just cracked, and that won't actually affect the tone. Other times you'll actually have breaks in the neck or in the body of the guitar. Something that you want to check is make sure that there are no cracks in between where the neck connects to the body of the guitar. All right, moving on to if you are going to buy used from a store, I would suggest that, well, first off, that's a great spot to start. Looking for a used guitar is awesome. Most of my guitars that I have are used, and when you buy from a store, they can help you and tell you what's wrong, or they probably won't tell you what's wrong if there's nothing wrong with it, but you can ask them after you buy it to have it set up. What that means is they will... sometimes the frets are really sharp, and so they need to adjust those or take them down, make sure the frets are even. They will restring the guitar for you, which is really helpful if you don't know how to string the guitar. And they will check the intonation. They will adjust the truss rod in the neck of the guitar, which are all things that I do not recommend that you do, especially if you're not knowledgeable at all. Or in general, I don't usually adjust some of that stuff myself, but I am learning, so hopefully I can teach and show you guys that in the future. Next, we've got buying new. Okay, buying new is a pretty good thing in general. It'll be more expensive than buying used, but that's okay. Same thing, there shouldn't be anything wrong with the guitar then if you buy it new. There's not really much to say about that. It'll just be more expensive. So, to recap, I would suggest buying from a local music shop or a store. You can buy online. There are just certain things that don't necessarily know what to look for. Another really good thing about buying from a store is you can go in and actually hold the guitar. Even if you don't know how to play it, you can hold the guitar and feel it. You can hold a bunch of different guitars and see which one you like better. You can check the body size, the style, everything that I mentioned earlier. You can check that and get a guitar that fits well for you. So I would definitely suggest buying from a store, but buying online is not bad. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is the brands, okay? I think a big misnomer is that something like Fender or Martin or Taylor will be extremely better than something that is maybe a lesser known brand. I don't think that this is true, and a lot of times the price doesn't necessarily reflect it. So you can get a less common or a less known brand name and get a better guitar for the quality price, just because those bigger names have to come down, and when they're made in a factory or whatever, you might not get the brand name quality that you will if you bought a guitar for like $1,000 or $2,000 with a Fender or Martin or whatever. You might not get that same Fender or Martin name. I don't know why I keep saying Fender or Martin. You might not get the same quality that you would. So I would just suggest that kind of forget about brand names, even if you don't know anything about brand names, and just hold the guitar, play it. You guys usually listen to music. I should hope you listen to music. And you'll be able to kind of hear when you strum or play a guitar, just the sound, right? Pick something that sounds good to you and something that you would want to play, something that sounds nice. Same thing with sounding nice. You want to pick a guitar that looks nice. If you like the way that the guitar looks or feels or whatever, you will be more likely to play it. So I would highly suggest that you get something that you like playing, or something that you like to look at, or whatever, it'll make it a lot easier. Trust me. If you buy a guitar that you think looks really cool and that you look cool playing it, you will be a lot more likely to play that guitar so that you look cool. Okay, so another thing, when you're looking at guitars and you'll notice that some guitars have different colors. The top two wood types for the top of the soundboard of the guitar are cedar and spruce. Cedar is usually a darker color, and a lot of people say it has a darker, warmer tone, as opposed to spruce, which has a brighter, crisp, clear tone. Sometimes, not always, you can tell the difference. I think a highly trained ear can tell the difference, but for the most part, it doesn't necessarily matter, especially if you're just getting into a guitar. So I would choose whichever one you think looks nice. If you've ever looked a guitar up on Amazon, you might see that it will say something like laminate top, back, and sides, or solid top, but laminate back and sides. The guitar is actually comprised, it's made of wood, obviously, but the top is really what you're going to want to look for. So if you have the money for it, I would definitely suggest that you buy a solid top guitar. It doesn't necessarily matter as much for the back and sides. If the back and sides are solid, it will be a more expensive guitar. So if the top's solid, the back and sides are solid, equals pricier, but it also sounds better because it's all wood. Although it's a little bit more difficult to distinguish between the sound. So I would suggest for a first guitar, if you can afford it, get a solid top, and then the back and sides can be laminate. You could get a laminate top and laminate back and sides if that's what you can afford. I would definitely suggest getting something that you can afford and want to play over something that is a little bit out of your price range and you're not sure if you want to play it. Just get a guitar and learn to play, and then you can always save up money for another guitar. That being said, I would suggest buying one of a brand, or not a brand, I would suggest buying a guitar that's a little bit higher on your price list, so that as you get better and you're a couple months into playing, you're still able to use that same guitar and it will sound better with you. A bad guitar, regardless of if really good people playing it, will usually still sound bad. So I would suggest getting a guitar that's a little bit higher end. It doesn't have to be too expensive, but just something that is a little bit nicer, so that as you become a better player, you will sound better, and this will just help you and your confidence when playing. Because it's not very encouraging to still sound awful when you feel like you know all this stuff. So this all leads us to price, right? What's it going to cost me? I would suggest there's a few different types, there's a few different ranges. So I would suggest looking within the... Okay, so this is where it gets tough, right? This is where it gets tricky. Price is a big deal. So you can usually find good guitars around $100 to $200. That, I'm going to say, that is a first price. I would not recommend buying a guitar for under $100, because if you think of the quality of what you're going to get, it just might not sound very good at all. Like I said earlier, it might not grow with you, and it might not, as you get better, it might not sound better, right, if it's just a more poorly made instrument. So $100 to $200 would probably be a low range. If you can find something in that, that would be good. Your next range is probably going to be the $200 to say $500, $600, $700, and this is really if you can afford to get something around 500, or the 200 to 500, 200 to 700. It's kind of, this is the middle range. This is really, you're going to get 500 probably being your mid-range, 200 being your lower end, and 700, 800, then you're starting to get into the upper mid-range quality for guitars. So at this point, it's whatever you can afford, but also you don't want to break your bank. If you were just starting out, I would not recommend buying a guitar that is more than $500 or getting into the $1,000, $2,000s, just because you won't be able to fully make the sound come out how you want. It could be very frustrating to buy a very nice guitar and it not sound good just because you're still trying to figure out and you're still learning how to play the guitar. So I would definitely recommend that you stay within the 200 to 500 range if you can. If you can't, the 100 to 200 will still get you there. But if you can get within the 200 to 500 range, I think you will be pretty happy with whatever guitar you get in that range. So, that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this little Christmas special. Man, I wish I could offer you a Christmas deal on a guitar. But anyway, nope, it's just a Christmas special video. So I hope you guys have learned a lot. I hope you guys find some good guitars. If you have any questions, let me know. But I hope to see you guys in my next video. Thanks.